Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Friday, June 10th installment of the Silicon Insider, the only uncensored look at life and business in the Valley. My name is Mike Malone, and I'm here with special contributor Scott Budman, technology reporter for NBC Bay Area. Our producer is Jordan Henderson. Our East Coast correspondent is Bob Grove. And our host, as always, is the Silicon Valley Business Journal. So first of all, Scott, congratulations. 2 graduations in a week. That's pretty impressive. That's like instant empty nest.
Well, yeah. Someone going off to college, you got a high school graduation. Yeah, good stuff. So thank you. Big week.
It's a long ways from those pictures behind you.
I know they remind us that they were once small.
Okay, so what do we got going on this week? Apple, had its worldwide developers conference. Anything come out of it interesting?
The most interesting thing.
FinTech. A little bit of FinTech coming out of there.
Yes, there were some actual, and it's funny, for a while we've had not only virtual Apple events, but very incremental Apple events. This one was actually largely in person. The recorded part, which laid it all out, was not the exciting part. The exciting part was when they let the developers into, that giant glass Steve Jobs theater. People got to see each other. I saw people, in the Apple universe that I haven't seen in years, in the press universe that I haven't seen in years. Tim Cook made an appearance and was instantly mobbed by, developers, and was doing selfies for about an hour and a half straight. So it had a feel of, sort of the old, let's get together and actually see each other in person kind of events. As for what they came up with, even the incremental stuff I thought was important. You mentioned FinTech. Apple is clearly tinkering with Apple Pay. You can now do, buy now, pay later features, which for a phone is pretty impressive. And they're adding little things to iMessage. You can edit your text a little bit later. You can change your lock screen. These are small things, but they hint at what Apple is always trying to do. Instead of hitting home runs, they're trying to just make it so that you're always on your device in one way or another. Right. And, this way you can use your phone to be a camera when you're on Zoom on your Mac, and, just little things like that probably won't make headlines. But if people really start to use them, could change the way that we do things like mobile payments, healthcare on wearable devices, things like that.
Well, if I was an online payment company, I'd be really nervous right now. I mean, it's not going to be a headline, but it could have some real transformative effects on the industry.
Yeah, there were a couple of companies, Affirm, which is one of them, that's I think started by a former Facebook executive, a buy now, pay later company, and even PayPal, that had their stocks take a hit as the keynote went on, which you see these days more and more from Apple events. Real-time
impact on the markets.
Yeah, you just know that startups and smaller companies are sweating it when they say, hey, we're going to tinker with this one feature that happens to be what another company does for a living.
Well, okay, so let's take the other side of the other pole. Elon Musk. He sent in the lawyers to dispute the Twitter deal, right?
Right.
But the board says it's still on. So Elon seems to be edging towards the door, but
running towards the door, Mike.
Running towards the door, but Twitter keeps saying, no, it's still happening. What do you think? Which story are you buying?
I think there are 2 stories that you buy here. I think Elon wants out, being very dramatic about it. I think his lawyers are, they've got a challenge, because this is, and we've talked about this before, this is a deal. This is a contract to buy this company at a specific price. Yes. And Musk went in, as Musk often does, a bit reckless, and saying, hey, we don't need to look too deeply into this company. I know what I want. I'll buy it as is. And then all of a sudden the lawyers are told, hey, come up with something that might let me make an exit here. And, they came up with, there are too many bots, which of all people, Elon Musk already knows plenty about bots.
He already knew that, but, he can hold them to that offering. They said, we represent that we have this many users and all of that. I mean, it's a viable way out if he really wants to use it, I think.
Possibly. I don't know. And the contract that's there and the lack of due diligence done ahead of time, I don't think is on Musk's side. I think that's on the board of directors side. And interestingly, remember, the board was criticized for taking this deal right away. Oh, they folded because Musk has so many fans and he's such a big presence on Twitter. Now they look like financial geniuses because Twitter stock is nowhere near the price of the deal that has been approved by both sides, but is now sort of being, I guess you could say, litigated.
You almost get that feeling the board was kind of like, no, don't buy us. Because they knew the numbers. I think they knew the numbers. I think you're right. Elon just went in there, flags flying in his usual impetuous way.
Right. And we did have and are in the midst of a pretty steep tech stock downturn that not only makes $54.20 a very attractive price for Twitter. I mean, it's nowhere near that and would probably be considerably lower if it weren't for the Musk deal. But even Tesla, which was $1 trillion company when all this started, up above $1,000 and is now some days falling even below 700, which, it still puts it at a high valuation. But if it's true that Musk is sort of borrowing on the value of some of the Tesla stock, if those shares go much lower, the deal could be in trouble there. I don't think that will happen.
Yeah, I think it looked like play money. I think it was, money, having fun money. And all of a sudden, it's not there anymore.
Well, apparently, even for the richest person in the world, you still have to meet deadlines and you still have to come up with money when you owe money. And Twitter board thinks he owes $44 billion.
I don't know if you read that other news item, but in China, Tesla has canceled 3 big recruiting events. When Musk said we're gonna freeze, we're gonna lay off 10% of our employees. Looks like he wasn't kidding, and it looks like it started in China.
It may have, but remember, he said he was going to lay off 10%. The stock took a hit. Everyone thought, whoa, that's transparency beyond what a CEO usually does, because you have your workers wondering if they're among the people who are about to get laid off. And then he said, no, I'm not talking about that. Anyone who makes cars is fine. We're actually going to add staff. And so again, you just can't trust what he says or does until some deed is done. And that's how I look at this Twitter deal. The deed is not yet done. And I'm no lawyer, but it looks like they have an agreement that's fairly ironclad. And I don't know if some sort of legal maneuvering to try to show that Twitter has more bots than we thought is going to get him out of this deal. I just think that he's going to end up paying a breakup fee and then maybe some legal fees. And there might be some lawsuits from shareholders if this thing doesn't go through, because again, they have a deal.
Lose a lot of money and walk away with nothing.
Right.
Yeah. There was a very interesting, do you know Vivek Wadhwa? He writes a lot for the Wall Street Journal and he has a blog and all those kind of things. He literally came out this week and said, it's a good thing that India is having second thoughts about working with Tesla, because Elon is a wild card. Elon, quote, has a serious drug addiction problem and is self-destructing. You don't see that in a article by a proven journalist very often. Common friends have expressed this concern, and I'm really sad that the greatest innovator of our time is going down this dark path. And then he said, the good news is that India doesn't need Elon or Tesla. The technology is now more than a decade old, and people are tired of the broken promises. Wow. I know he's going for views, but and you got in the modern world of the web, you got everything's hyperbole, but that's a pretty strong statement, verging on libel. Can he prove? Can he prove Elon's a drug addict?
No, that's the thing. I don't think we have any proof of that, and that seems to be a wild swing. I think there's a different D word at work here, and that is drama. And I think for Musk, it's very important that he's sort of the center stage of things.
Yeah.
And
he likes the lights.
Exactly. And when, you hinted at earlier, when you're the richest person, you've got what seems to be play money. And it's like, hey, I love Twitter. I, have raised the valuation of my car company because people love it because they read about it on Twitter. I'm going to buy Twitter. And all of a sudden, there's drama there too. And so, we may be wringing our hands. Is the deal going to fall through? I think he just really enjoys the drama of it all. And this could last months, everybody. This isn't going to be solved next Monday or Tuesday. This could last for months. There's even something that says if it's not done by October and there are some sort of mitigating circumstances, you can take another 6 months. So this could be into 2023. And I really feel for the Twitter employees and shareholders who are riding this roller coaster because Elon likes drama.
And do they really want to ride this roller coaster during a recession?
Well, you want to have a job.
One more thing added to their lives,
Right. And that's a big point there, because you want a job during a recession. You always want a job. And 6 months ago, anyone on Twitter could have said, I work at Twitter. I have these crazy tech skills. I'll go anywhere else. Now we're starting to see companies either have layoffs or say they're putting on hiring freezes. And so there may not be nearly as much mobility for, aggrieved Twitter employees.
I really think that I'm feeling a turning around here. I was talking to the son of a friend of mine. He's doing very well in the Valley. And he was saying, I wonder if I should look for someplace else. What do you think? And I said, not now. Safe harbor time. Stay in the job you got seniority. Don't be looking right now. And I think that philosophy I'm starting to feel it coming up everywhere in the Valley. It's except for one place, AI. Apparently, all the big companies like Meta and all that are losing their AI gurus. They're all going to these startups. All of a sudden, they're getting recruited away because the startups got $1 billion in venture capital money in the last few months, and they're just hiring the best talent they can. It's kind of interesting. They're going to where are they going? Inflection, Cohere, Adept, Anthropic, and they've been poached away from all the big tech companies. That's usually a sign that we're going to see a lot of things happening. And when you see the best people in a field leave a company, no matter what their reasoning is, that usually means that company, the older company, is not going to do as well in that market in the years to come.
It may be. It's hard for really large companies. I mean, in one way, it's easy because they have a lot of cash, but it's hard for a giant company. And let's face it, Meta is now a giant company to pivot like that. It took Microsoft a long time. And I don't have many other examples. I mean, HP failed at it. There are a lot of big companies, Sun Micro, that really were unable to pivot, at least nearly as quickly as the smaller companies.
It's the story of the Valley.
Right.
You can have a great company and all that, but new startups are so appealing. The prospect of having founder stock, having carte blanche, having a lot of money, you're being funded. I mean, why would you stay? That isn't the personality of this town, to stay safe in a big old company. There's much more excitement in life, and it's much more rewarding, even if you fail, to be in a startup. And I think we're in that mode with AI right now.
True. And my only question to you is, when recessionary times hit, startups struggle, right? And so isn't that when the big companies that have the cash say, okay, instead of trying to pivot towards, let's say, this new area, whether it's AI or the metaverse or whatever, we'll just buy up the smaller companies that are going to struggle because it's a recession. They have the talent, they have the technology kind of already there. Let's just buy them and save those workers. And at the same time, allow us to get a new thing without having to really focus on that thing.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true, except for one thing, which is startup companies struggle during recessions, but starting a company, there's no better time than a recession, because you've got a lot of talent on the street. You've got time. The big companies are kind of locking down and hunkering down against the recession. So they're not moving. So it's a perfect time to go under the radar and build yourself a startup with some really good talent. And then as the economy begins to come out, that's when you go talk to the VCs. I mean, I think you've seen more great companies start during downtimes.
That's true.
Than you do during good times. Yeah. But it's a gamble, because if the recession lasts, you're still sitting there at Starbucks with your business plan and your teammates, and nobody's making any money, and you can't find any money yet. So it's always a high risk, but that's the perfect time. Everybody listening, if you're going to start a company, get ready. This is the moment. I'll see you at Pete's at that far table. Speaking of big companies, I got a note from Bob. He's saying the Gessinger glow is beginning to fade. Intel, Gelsinger re-arrived and he was going to come. He came back to Intel and he was going to really get things moving. And he did a frenzy of activity, but the stock is starting to slide now. They've still got another 2 years before they get those onshore fabs up and running. It's hard to come back. Once you miss, I think Gates said it, once you miss one business cycle, it's very, very hard to catch up. And Intel lost it 10 years ago and they've been struggling ever since.
Yeah, if someone were to say, at least in the tech world, the biggest surprise of 2022 that, we wouldn't have seen coming in years past, earlier this year, AMD became a more valuable company than Intel. Yeah. Somewhere Jerry Sanders is looking
laughing.
down.
Laughing. Oh yeah, he's pouring drinks for the house.
And so right now they're very close, within a few billion of each other. And on top of that, you have Nvidia, which was always in Intel's shadow. It's now something like 3 times the valuation of Intel, even after getting chopped down. Intel is just no longer the shot caller of the valley that it once was. And I know there are other companies you could say that, Cisco, HP, et cetera. But in the chip world, which has seen a very strong renaissance, chips are once again the center of the action. Intel has sort of been left out of that equation. It's more the Qualcomms and the Nvidias, and even under Lisa Su, AMD.
Yeah, and Intel had a hell of a run, 40 years at the top. But the problem is not companies getting old around here. The problem is what we just talked about. Talent migrates towards what's hot, and Intel hasn't been hot for a while. And at a certain point, we saw this with Microsoft, where a company, the people at the top were ambitious still, they had great ideas and all that, but it's like their body is paralyzed. They just can't make the company move at the rate with the rate of innovation that they thought it could, because they've lost too many of those key people. And I wonder if that's what's happening in Intel. And ironically, if Intel had gotten those fabs online, the Wall Street Journal today has a story about how the chip shortage is spreading now. It's not just, engine computers for F-150s. Now we're talking about the really high end, 10 billion transistors on a chip, server level and supercomputer level chips. TMSC is having a heck of a time getting them built. Things are starting to delay. We're entering into unexpectedly an age of lack of supply. We're seeing it in baby formula and all sorts of places, but we're beginning to see it everywhere across chips. And if that happens, everything starts to slow down. And we talked about this 6 months ago with the chip shortage and the lack of fab. There's this lag time right now. We're waiting for all those big factories to get built, for TMSC to get off of Taiwan and get somewhere else. We could begin to see Moore's law slowing down simply because they can't fab them right now. And that could last another 2, 3, 4 years till the inventory start getting replenished. It's going to be tough.
Right. And I think that's part of the reason you're seeing companies like Apple and to an extent Tesla trying to say, hey, we'll make our own chips because we just can't count on the traditional, suppliers.
Yeah, well, the problem with saying we'll make our own chips is what they're really saying is we'll contract an offshore supplier, and what company is that? TMSC. They're the ones beginning to have real shortages now. You can't just go and say, hey, make us a new chip design here. They don't have the capacity right now. So I don't see an easy fix on this. Okay, so we also got a note from Jordan. And Jordan was saying, pointed out that the lawmakers in the EU have agreed. I mean, there was some concern about this on a single mobile charging port for mobile phones, tablets, and cameras. So this is kind of interesting. Did you see that any kind of ripple effect on that on Apple at the developers meeting?
No, not yet, but I think
Aren't they starting to add USB-C ports and
they're adding them, yeah. And Apple is doing it under the guise of, we don't need a plug and it cuts down on packaging and it's less harmful for the environment. And that's also something that was cited in the European decision. Hey, if we have one connector, it's more, simpatico with everything else and also better for the environment. So I think this is not one of those things where the EU is saying, hey, let's completely shut down an American tech company.
You can't even plug it in if you don't use our equipment. Yeah.
Right. And that's the EU sort of saying, hey, at least when you're over here, you got to use our standard. But I think Apple is already starting to go towards that standard. But Apple and tech companies don't want different standards for different countries. They want to go by what Thomas Friedman said so famously, that we're in a flat earth and everyone uses everything together. And that's sort of the dream of, if you're a car company or if you're a phone company. And this sort of puts a little bit of a dent in that. I know that Apple has the resources to adjust, but it's interesting that the EU, for its size, has a pretty big stick over the tech industry that it continues to use.
They're taking advantage of it.
Yeah, over and over again.
I got to say, though, I hated the Apple plug. But, as years go by and as I get more maladroit and trip over things, the fact that I don't tear the plug apart and it just pops right off the machine has actually become a real benefit for me in my old age. So I'm curious to see what the EU comes up with as the new standard. And finally, let's talk about this just for a couple of minutes. I think we have a few moments left, 6 minutes. I was working with a woman named Annette Finsterbush, and she is one of the few women CEOs in the battery business. And she comes out of Applied Materials. She was in their VC wing, and she runs a company called N-Power, and they're in Indianapolis. And we got to talking about the battery shortages because, it's beginning to show up in the news. People are starting to talk about it. And I said, well, how bad is it? We had that story last week about that Portuguese electric automaker saying, we're going to have real shortages in a couple of years. And she said, I think he's being optimistic. And she told me why. She says, if you look at the entire food chain, the supply chain of batteries at every level, we're running into shortages. She says, at digging the stuff out of the ground, we're having to deal with bad guys around the world. If you want to get cobalt, you have to go to the Congo. So we're not doing enough digging right now, trying to find the raw materials. Then you go down to the next level, the architecture of these batteries. There's so many different kinds. It's not like they make one C cell for the entire world. You have AA's, AAA's, you have car batteries, you have watch batteries, on and on. You have a different kind of battery in your hedge clipper. Because of that different architectures, you can't, just scale up one size fits all. You have to pick and choose which designs you're going to make. And then she said, you go down to the next level. And she said, there's, if you look at batteries like in your Tesla, once it gets down to about 80% productivity, you have to throw it out. Well, what do you do with those? There's not much you can do. You really can't put those on the side of a house because it might set the house on fire. So where does it go? It either gets recycled, and there's not enough recycling companies to take these things apart down to their components and run it back through the system. So it goes in the landfill. Well, if it goes in the landfill, you're talking the next environmental disaster because that's going to be billions of batteries. When all those Teslas get to be about 10 years old and all those batteries get torn out, we're going to have a serious mess on our hands. So she actually said, we actually need, and you wouldn't expect this, government to get involved at different levels, like investment, kind of a semi-tech and, DARPA kind of arrangement. But she said the danger right now is government looks like the feds look like they're going back to picking winners in the field, which is just going to make things even messier. So I thought that was a very quick summary by her, and I thought that's interesting, and it kind of predicts what's going to be in the news in the next couple of years as we go more. You know, we seem to be trying to shift more and more towards electric, but that electric, especially batteries, has got some real serious, you know, production problems and supply problems coming up. As I said, it's the era of short supply.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like that's going to end all that soon, especially if along the supply chain companies have to lay people off instead of add people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's the recycling issue is something that I know battery companies are dealing with, and supply issues they're dealing with. And at the same time, people are saying, hey, we want to buy these cars. If you look at the inflation numbers just out this morning, used cars are up something 18% year over year in cost. New cars, something like 14, 15, 16% year over year. And it's not that, that's not a thing of, hey, wages are up a little bit. That's because there's a shortage and it's really harder to get your hands on them. I don't know how long that will last, but that's what's hitting home to people right now. It's hard to get your hands on what you want.
I wouldn't have thought, I would never would have guessed that my 25-year-old beater Toyota Altima is actually worth more than, you know, it's actually gone up in value more than the art in my house. That buying a beater is actually a good investment right now, but it's absolutely true. You know, hang on to that car, get it fixed, you know, right now, because boy, you know, some interesting things are about to happen. She's optimistic. She says, I come out of the chip industry. You know, we did miracles for 25 years. Every time they said there's going to be a shortage, there's going to be Moore's Law's coming to an end, she said, somebody came up with a miracle. And she says, I think it's going to happen. I believe it's going to happen in the battery business too. But, you know, when you start depending upon miracles, that's usually a bad sign. So we'll see. Anything else you want to add before we run out of time?
No, I think you covered it all.
We've been flaming along here. Okay, that's it for now, folks. You can find us on the Silicon Valley Business Journal homepage, as well as on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, LinkedIn, and of course, our YouTube page. Have a great weekend. Have a great graduation, Scott.
Thank you.
Congratulations again. And we'll see you next week.